Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another series of movie reviews. If you watched my last video, you'll know that we touched on movies that I call my favorite road trip movies that I watch before I go on a long drive anywhere. Today we're going to be doing a look at movies based on my favorite mode of transportation, and that's railroad theme movies. So we're going to be hitting the high iron, and we're going to take a look at movies that are completely, or pretty much completely, based on the railroad themed stories, that kind of thing. So, granted, there's movies where there's scenes that involve trains, but these are movies that are pretty much almost all themed around railroads. So let's hit the high iron and take a look.
I'm Will Coulson. We're working together today. I train 1206. Is there a problem?
I just don't like working at a damn daycare center.
I don't like working at a retirement home, so.
All right. This ain't training. In training, they just give you an F. Out here, you get killed. Married?
Sort of. It's a long story. How about you? You married?
Got two beautiful daughters.
Have fun.
What do we do when we get to a railroad crossing?
We have an unmanned train rolling into a highly populated area with no air brakes.
Yeah.
1206.
What's up?
There's an unmanned train on the northbound track.
It's under power?
It's coming straight at us. What are we worried about in terms of cargo?
8 freight cars of hazardous chemicals. We're not just talking about a train. We're talking about a missile the size of the Chrysler Building.
I need to know where that train is.
We're not exactly sure.
You're not sure? We'll find out. Watch out!
It gets worse.
I've got 150 students coming in on some field trip on track 16.
Train that size going that fast will vaporize anything in front of it.
We have been told to anticipate an event radius 20 to 45 miles.
The only way to stop that kind of power, grab it by the tail, gun in the opposite direction. Are you in or you out?
You want to kill yourself, you do it alone,
All right, you do what you want.
Wait!
I'm not risking this company just because some engineer wants to play hero.
Not for you. Not doing it for you.
This is Will Coulson, your conductor. We're gonna run this bitch down.
Tell your sister I love you both.
The train is increasing in speed.
We're gonna be coming in too hot.
Just lost our brakes! Hey!
Close your eyes if you want it.
You got a real knack for inspiring confidence, you know that?
So first up on the list is the 2010 movie Unstoppable, starring Denzel Washington and Chris Pine as engineer and conductor of a freight train heading north through Pennsylvania when an out-of-control train leaves the yard north of them and comes at them head-on. After they pass the train, they uncouple their locomotive and they go on a chase after the runaway, eventually slowing it down and then stopping it before it crashes and causes a major disaster, since the train that's runaway is carrying hazardous chemicals. The movie is loosely based on real-life events that did happen here in Ohio. Back in May of 2001, a CSX yard crew was switching cars in a yard up in Toledo when the conductor and brakeman, they were down on the ground doing the uncoupling of the cars when the train was stopped, that kind of thing. Train was pulling forward, so a single locomotive pulling 47 cars, and the engineer realized there was a switch that was misaligned up ahead. It was a trailing point switch where basically two tracks come together as one. is lined for the other track, and he went to stop the train, realized he wasn't going to stop in time, and rather than just write it out like he should have, he set the brakes and jumped off the locomotive, threw the switch, and then realized that the train was actually accelerating instead of braking. Apparently, he had set the train brakes, which in a yard move was ineffective because in the yard the air hoses are not connected in the between the cars, so the train brakes were not effective at stopping the train. He set the locomotive's independent brake, which applies the brakes on the locomotive itself, and then he thought he had set the dynamic brake, which is basically his resistance in the motors to slow the train. Only thing is, this is apparently an older control stand that he was using, from what I understand from what I read online. And when he shut the throttle down to slow the train and try to stop it, he should have the throttle basically had another lever where you switch from power to braking. So and in the excitement of trying to get the train stopped and get out to throw the switch, he forgot to flip the one lever from power to braking. So leaving the throttle in power mode, he basically mistakenly threw the throttle wide open, thinking it was in braking, and jumped off the train, or jumped off to throw the switch. Only thing was, the locomotive accelerated, and he was not able to get back on board. Now, granted, the trains do have what's called an alerter, where basically the locomotive, if the engineer doesn't move the throttle brake or anything like that for a certain amount of time, like I think it's like 20 seconds or 30 seconds, I'm not sure, but basically the locomotive will shut down and go into emergency braking. If well, the alarm goes off, then if the engineer doesn't reset that, it goes into the train will shut down and go into emergency braking. The thing was, he set the independent brake on the locomotive, and that basically tricked the system into thinking someone who was at the controls knew what they were doing, and as a result, the locomotive did not get shut down. Instead, it stayed in full power and took off. There was a couple of attempts to derail it. They did put, like in the movie, they put portable derails onto the track at one point to try to derail the train. The train basically was going too fast because the derails are only meant for 3 or 4 miles an hour, whereas in this case the train was moving at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. So basically the wheels bounced over the derail like a speed bump. And there's another point where they tried diverting the train into a slow-speed siding, thinking that the sudden S-curve over to the side would cause the train to flip off the track and derail and basically stop. And the train stayed on the track. There was a northbound train. They basically routed the train south out of Toledo towards Columbus. There's a northbound train that had basically an identical locomotive on it. They got into the siding, uncoupled, and then they pulled in behind the runaway, caught up to the runaway, and coupled onto it. And they were able to slow it down to about 10 miles an hour. And then, I can't remember the exact town, but there's a long grade crossing where the tracks crosses at a really sharp angle with the road. And someone, one of the railroad employees that was there, was able to run alongside the locomotive as it got slowed down and jump on board and shut it down. The movie, basically, it had a lot of the elements of the real life events. The school field trip that was portrayed in the movie. Earlier that morning of the actual runaway, there had been an Operation Lifesaver train that had been heading along that route, where basically, if you're not familiar with Operation Lifesaver trains, they have state troopers to basically ride the trains and report to the other law enforcement in cars of crossing violators. People basically going around the gates or through the flashing lights, that kind of thing. It's basically, sight crossing violators. So as a result of that, there was a lot of police presence around that particular route that day. But it was, in the real life situation, it was a serious situation. The locomotive's headlight was not lit, which on a moving train, headlight's supposed to be lit. You have all these, and this is rural Ohio, where basically you had a lot of unprotected crossings and that sort of thing, where people would pull up to the crossing expecting to hear a train horn if there's a train coming, and no one's in the cab to blow the horn. So it was a serious situation. In the movie, there was a scene where they put a couple locomotives in front of the train to try and slow it down. In the real life case, they didn't actually get to that point. They did, apparently, though, farther down the route, from what I remember reading, they did have some locomotives waiting to possibly get in front of the train, or let the train runaway catch up to them, and then they would be able to basically block it and slow it down and bring it to a stop. So, but the two things that got me when this movie came out was this came out in late 2010. In 2011, when I went out rail fanning, I could not go anywhere rail fanning without somebody asking me, "Hey, have you heard or did you see Unstoppable?" It's like that was the whole talk in the rail fan community every time I went out rail fanning. And so, I mean, and then the other thing that got me too, excuse me, that when the movie came out was on the Internet Movie Database. Back then they had the chat rooms for the movies, or message boards for the movies. And so many people were like, "Oh, this would never happen in real life." And it's like, it's based on the real thing that really did happen. So, granted, there's no actual collision like what is just depicted here. There's, it was really fortunate that day. CSX is really fortunate because there was so much potential for a major disaster with, the train could have derailed the tank cars with chemicals in them, could have spilled. Someone could have gotten hit at a grade crossing, and with the train, nobody at the controls to stop the train. If a car got T-boned, it could literally been pushed down the tracks, and who knows what would happen. But it was really, it's an amazing series of events that took place that set off the whole story, and it was an amazing series of events too that resolved it. So, but that's Unstoppable. So let's move on to the next movie.
Listen to that engine. I've been riding this engine for over 10 years, and I've learned its language. Bill Travers now, he can't wait to make his last run on that brand new engine we got. You seen it? No. It's got a lot more power. And I'll bet it's a lot quieter, too. Of course, that's the trouble. It don't talk to you.
What's she saying to you now, Holly?
Right now, saying the tracks are icy. And I'm gonna break her just a mite. 10 pounds of air doesn't even slow us at all. I'll give her 10 more. Hang on. I'm gonna stop the train. Come in, Jim.
So next up is the 1973 TV movie Runaway. The movie is basically about a ski train out in Colorado that is trying to come. It's basically coming down from a ski resort, and along the way, the engineer discovers that the train has no brakes. They try pulling the emergency brakes and handbrakes in the cars, and then realizing that they're going too fast for those to take any effect, and basically the movie resolves itself basically the same way that the story of Unstoppable was resolved. Basically, they have take a new locomotive, have it chase the runaway couple up to it, and slow it down, basically pulling it to a stop from behind. The train on the movie is basically the Denver and Rio Grande Westerns ski train that runs out of Denver. Basically, in the movie, they've got thinly disguised as a Sierra Pacific train. Basically, it looks like the Rio Grande's paint scheme, only it's Sierra Pacific instead. The movie had a pretty big cast for a TV movie. You had Ed Nelson and Vera Miles playing a divorced couple who were on the trip trying to figure out their divorce and everything. You had Martin Milner and Lee H. Montgomery as a father and son who were the father who is trying to push his kid to overcome his fears of skiing and everything. And this is back around season 5, I think it was, of when Martin Milner was doing Adam 12. And then you had other cast members or other side stories throughout the movie. But the movie, I mean, it's basically a TV disaster movie where basically they had multiple storylines going on at the same time, and of course everything gets brought together by this runaway train. The movie, it's a short movie. It's only 75 minutes. Of course, it was a TV movie back then. They apparently had a lot more commercials apparently back then, but I think it was on NBC this was released on. And the movie, I mean, they did a pretty accurate, relatively accurate portrayal of railroading. You had Ben Johnson playing the engineer, who they realistically showed the controls and everything with the throttle and the brake and everything. They had the crew calling out the signals as they passed them. It had a rather realistic dispatcher's display in the dispatcher center where they showed I mean, granted, it looked a little bit more modern than some of the old Union switch and signal dispatcher panels, but they had all the switches for the switches and the signals on the display and everything. So they pretty much made it pretty accurate there, and or pretty realistic there. So it's an entertaining little 75-minute movie. It's not it's one of my favorites, but it's not like one of the top favorite movies of all time or anything like that. But for a 75-minute movie, it's an entertaining movie. There's a little bit of cheesiness to it with some of the storylines and everything, but for 75-minute escape from reality and everything, it's pretty entertaining. So plus the fact that they did use the actual train and everything and scenes and everything on the actual Denver and Rio Grande ski train, and plus you get to see some of these. I think those are look like GP30s Well, first one is GP30, and the second one looks like an EMD, a newer EMD unit. But anyways, getting to see, some of these older rolling stock that's probably not around anymore. I'm not sure if this exact E train's even around anymore. The locomotives I think are probably retired, but I think the cars are probably retired now too. But yeah, it's an entertaining little movie to watch. And for a TV movie, I thought it was pretty well made. So let's move on to the next in our list.
He's pushing me.
Please, try again, and I'll send you out of here in plastic.
He wants me to jump the wall. Come on, go for it. Thanks, youngster. I owe you one.
Hey, Manny, take me with you.
They escaped together. They battled the elements. They achieved the impossible.
Smile, man, we're free.
But their train to freedom was out of control.
I don't know what happened, but there's no engineer on this train. There's nobody on this train but us.
The brake shoes have burned off. The overspeed control must have gotten screwed up. Engineers do not just croak. You want to be a tough guy? You want to be a legend? Go back! Sucker, come on!
Ain't getting caught alive.
Let's have some fun.
You'll never stop this train, you hear me, Regan? Never! I'll kill you, man. You die, sucker. Don't make me kill you. Shut it down! Manny, God! Shut it down!
Their struggle for freedom became a fight for their lives. John Voight, Eric Roberts, Rebecca De Mornay, and Andrei Konchalovsky-Film. Runaway Train.
Next on the list is the 1985 thriller Runaway Train, starring John Voight and Eric Roberts as two escaped convicts from a maximum security prison in Alaska. They flee through the Alaskan wilderness and hop on board 4 locomotives in a rail yard. The engineer starts up the locomotives, has a heart attack and falls off, and then the train, or the consist, basically is rolled out onto the main line and is basically out of control. While on the train, there's a collision between the 4 locomotives and a caboose of a passing freight train. They then meet up with a railroad worker who apparently fell asleep in one of the locomotives. The 3 of them desperately are trying to get to the front locomotive to shut down everything. And then, in the meantime, you also have the controllers in the dispatch center who are trying to get the train stopped. And you also have the warden, played by John P. Ryan, who in the prison was a very sadistic human being, basically referring to the prisoners as human waste, basically. And so anyways, he's also after the train to stop, or basically get the 2 prisoners, because the one prisoner, played by John Voight, he basically had repeatedly escaped from prison and is basically not wanting to go back. He's basically not wanting to get caught alive or anything like that. So the movie is really good. The prison part, when I was a little kid and watching this, the prison part was kind of slow for me, but once you get to the railroad scenes, the action really starts to pick up. The movie is, I've never actually heard any actual official word or anything, but The movie seems to be based on an actual event that happened on the New York Central back in the 1960s. I read about in, I think it was Reader's Digest. I came across an article online from Reader's Digest about it, where there's a technician working on a set of 4 locomotives that was set up in the yard. Somebody, the hostler in the yard, started to move the locomotives, and somehow fell off or something. And anyways, the locomotives went out of control. They switched the locomotives out onto the main line, thinking the red signals would trip the automatic train stop, and but that didn't stop them. So, like in the movie, the guy that was working as a technician, he started uncoupling the multiple unit cables between the locomotives to shut the locomotives down and bring to slow the train before he got to the head end, where he finally managed to shut down the locomotive. The movie was filmed primarily up in Alaska on the Alaskan Railways, on the, I think it's the Whittier branch, I believe it was. Of course, they also used large-scale models for like the scene being depicted behind me here. The movie was really well done, I thought. There's some, like all railroad movies, there's some discrepancies in how things are portrayed, but the movie was, I thought, was really well made. You really feel the brutal coldness of the Alaskan wilderness that the train's going through, with everything that's going on, and everybody getting rather desperate at trying to get the train stopped and everything. So, really good movie. I thought everyone in the movie gave really good performance, and you know, it's an entertaining movie. It's close to 2 hours, I think it is. But like I said, you know, the prison part, you know, I've come to appreciate that more as I've gotten older. It's more of a, it really does help with the story, if you know, with the prison part, obviously. But you know, the whole movie, though, you know, you watch it as a whole, and it's really a good movie. So, so with that, let's go on to the next one.
BBC Sunday Night Movies. Tonight, the Coastliner was the fastest, safest train on wheels.
The 90-minute safety margin.
The Coastliner, an all-star cast hurtling 120 miles an hour to oblivion.
What is going on?
We want you to stop the train. 2 trains head on one track.
Stop the train.
But nothing could stop them.
How many more minutes do we have before those 2 trains smash into each other?
Nothing could stop. Disaster on the Coastliner.
Next up is the 1979 ABC TV movie, Disaster on the Coastliner. They had an all-star cast with William Shatner, Raymond Burr, Lloyd Bridges, E.G. Marshall, and a whole host of others, all starring in this thriller where a madman wanting revenge against a railroad company decides to basically rewire the company's computers to basically route 2 Amtrak passenger trains head-on into each other. One train, he knocks the engineer out and takes control of the one train. The other train, he has the computer set up so that he has the only communication with the engineer on the opposing train, which the opposing train also happens to be carrying the vice president, or the wife of the vice president of the United States. So Secret Service agents are all over the place on that train. The movie is a pretty good movie. Surprisingly, Amtrak took part in making the movie, which was, I say, surprising because one movie that's coming up, they didn't want any part of it because of the ending. But anyways, there's some rather interesting scenes in here. There's one where they had a helicopter trying to stop the one train, literally flying right in front of the train, keeping pace with it. There's another scene, which is right here, where the conductor of the one train, as well as William Shatner, they are trying to, since they can't get into the engineer who hijacked the train, they are trying to uncouple the locomotive from the cars to save all the passengers on the train. So, in my opinion, this is a really amazingly well done stunt here, where people are literally going between the locomotive and first car of a speeding Amtrak passenger train. I mean, that was, I don't know if anyone who would willingly want to do that kind of stunt work and go in to a train, because one slip and literally you're gone. But basically the way what happens is they uncouple the locomotive from the hijack train. The other train, they splice in a crossover and route the other train onto the parallel track to avoid a head-on collision. And then the runaway locomotive from the hijack train, it hits the section or the work area, and there's a big spectacular crash. Movie, I thought it was okay, or well, it's entertaining, I should say. If you're into seeing vintage Amtrak equipment that was at the time pretty much new, because the F-40s that they have in the movies, or in this movie, this is like, I think they came out in '76, so this is like 3 years after they first came out. You also get to see one of the early versions of Amtrak's Phase 3 paint scheme. Then you also have all the Amfleet 1 equipment in the trains as well. Those were relatively new as well. So, being able to see Amtrak equipment pretty much new and nice and shiny and everything, not worn out, it's neat being able to see that. The movie, it's not technically accurate. For one thing, the guy basically goes into the dispatcher center and basically literally rewires the computer, which you'd have to be a genius, I think, to be able to do that. Dispatcher's display on the one wall of the entire route between Los Angeles and San Francisco basically had a double track route, and that was it. There's no crossovers, nothing, except for like one small stretch of single track of the southbound where the southbound train was on, and then it basically the whole thought that there's only those two trains between the entire route between LA and San Francisco, that I thought was a little far-fetched. And plus the scene here where they splice in a crossover. I can't remember if it was 30 yards or 40 yards of track. But, I mean, basically, that short a distance is not enough for a high-speed crossover. They said that the trains are moving at 120 miles an hour. And granted, yes, the engineer is applying emergency brakes as he's coming up on the work folks, or workers, but still, a train moving that fast is not going to make it through a crossover that sharp. I thought this scene here too was pretty well done with all these workers that were, pretty much right next to a moving train. I would not want to get that close myself. And then later, when the runaway locomotive hits the work area, that was done with it was done with somebody there's a stuntman who stepped away from the tracks just before the locomotive went whizzing past. I think he's standing on like a dummy rail that was next to the actual track that the locomotive was on. And then the actual crash was done with a large-scale model. I think the model, I saw it in Model Railroader magazine, I think it was, or someplace. And basically the model was like waist high if a person's standing, so it's like 3 feet tall or something. So it's a pretty big scale model, and I thought that was pretty well done with making it realistic. And as a kid, I thought it was a real locomotive crashing. So, but I mean, the movie's entertaining. It's kind of cheesy. It's, you know, it's a 70s TV movie, so it's a little bit of cheesiness to it. But you know, you get to see William Shatner in something other than Star Trek, and you know, you get, this is before you know, Airplane, so you get to see Lloyd Bridges in one of his serious roles. Interesting thing too is William Shatner, Lloyd Bridges, and Raymond Burr are all in this movie, and 3 years later they'd be in Airplane 2, the sequel. So it's a little interesting, that kind of interesting that the three of them were in 2 different movies that close together. But so, anyways, let's move on to the next movie.
The train. They strafed it. They sabotaged it.
Stop! I want this engine back on the rails.
If we had 10 times as many men, it couldn't be done.
I tell you it will. Do you hear me? I tell you it will.
They bombed it. They cursed it.
To hell with London. We started this whole thing for one reason. To stop the train. Because the Allies were going to be here. Well, where are they? Every day they've been duped. And every day a man has been killed for thinking they were just over the next hill. I say to hell with it. Now they want us to paint the train? Let them blow it up.
They died for it. It carried their tears.
Why did you come back here? You want everyone killed? Men are such fools. Men want to be heroes, and the widows mourn.
It carried their fears.
Colonel! Stop them. What can you gain by the death of one old man? What he did can make no difference. The train will go on. You have the authority. You can stop it.
It carried their hopes.
You crazy bastard. Who are you going to get to help you? Have you thought of that? Who are you going to get to help you?
Me. I can't fight.
That's 2 of us. Small army. It carried their nation's honor.
This is our pride. What we create and hold for the world. There are worse things to risk your life for than that.
It carried them to the peak of glory.
You can't ride through an air raid!
Watch me!
You dump, you old goat! Get out of there and get under cover!
Get off my train!
You damn fool! They'll be ready bombs any second!
Get off my train!
You can't get through! The switch is closed!
Open it!
It will carry you to the peak of adventure.
What about my men? I don't care about your men. I order you to unload those trucks.
Save your orders, Colonel. In this sector, the war is over.
Back into trucks! I'll have you shot!
carry you to the peak of adventure.
So next on my favorite railroad-related movies is the 1964 war drama, The Train, starring Burt Lancaster as a French resistance to the German invasion, and Sir Paul Scofield as the Nazi colonel who's wanting to steal Paris Art Museum's collection of paintings and take them to Germany. He basically orders a train to take the artwork to Germany, while the resistance, headed by Burt Lancaster, does everything they can to delay and at one point misroute the train so that it doesn't, so that France's national heritage is kept safe and kept within the country for when the war ends, so that the Germans have no longer have it in their possession. The movie was very well done. I've never really been one to get into war movies per se, but this one, I mean, it was really well done with, you know, showing the operations and everything of how they tried to do everything they could to stop the train or delay the train. They also used actual railroad equipment that was close to getting retired at the time, which, if I remember right, caused a bit of a stir for railroad preservationists who hated seeing all this railroad equipment getting, you know, crashed and blown up. But the movie, I mean, it was really amazingly well done. There was an air raid towards the beginning of the movie where, you know, it was meticulously done to portray the resistance trying to delay this train of this other train that was an armament train that was getting ready to leave. And then there's this crash sequence here where the resistance crashes the train, blocking the main line. The art train crashes into it, and then they bring another locomotive up behind it to smash into the other end of the train to basically keep the train smashed into, or basically stopped at both ends, so they couldn't just take off with it. Movie is really well made. Good acting from everyone there in the movie. And some impressive stunt work too. This was Burt Lancaster did all of his stunts in this movie, and I can't remember this actor's name who's playing the fireman on the train, but he, you know, this is not a stunt man. This is the actual actor going between the train cars to uncouple the cars on a moving train. So so there was some risky stunt work done, and but I mean, the movie, it really plays out well. Like I said, you know, I don't normally get into wartime movies, but this is definitely one of my favorites. It is a bit of a long movie. It is 2 hours and like 20-25 minutes or something like that. So, but it's a good movie. If you want to see what was like with the resistance, you know, to the Nazi invasion over in Europe at the time, you know, this is one of those movies that I think does a pretty good job at portraying it. So, and with that, we're going to move on to my all-time favorite movie, or favorite railroad movie of all time.
George Caldwell is taking the Silver Streak to Chicago.
First class? Yes, sir. Right this way.
He's a busy publisher who's taking the train for one reason only.
I just want to be bored. Come on. Well, you're in for the ride of your life. Yeah. You just pick out a little chickie, my friend, and it's hug and munch all the way to Chicago.
What do you publish?
Oh, mostly nonfiction. Cookbooks, how-to-do-it books.
It's very interesting. Are you married?
Divorced.
But in the next 3 days, he will fall in love
He will witness a murder and become involved in a bizarre international intrigue.
All right, listen, Buster, you're in trouble. And I mean big trouble, because I'm reporting you. All right, enough's enough. If you're willing to forget it, I don't believe this. Are you kidding?
From an innocent passenger, George Caldwell will become a victim, a man who will be forced to risk his life in order to save it.
Hold it! Don't move or I'll shoot!
He will fall into possession of the priceless Rembrandt papers and into a perfect frame-up for murder.
Holy moly, you shot him!
All right, mister. Just keep your hands where they are and we'll have no trouble. Give me that.
Don't you?
He will make a friend.
Who are you? I'm a thief, man. What they want you for anyway, man?
Murder.
Drop me off anywhere along in here, okay? I don't mess with the big earn.
And become a fugitive from the law, wanted in every state.
Wait right here.
Go get the tickets and it's goodbye, George.
What are you talking about? Well, how are we going to get on the train?
Got an idea.
I can't pass for black.
You tell him. I didn't say I was going to make you black. I said I was going to get you on the train.
It's comedy.
That's my man. That's my man.
I don't think we'll make it past the cops.
We'll make it past the cops. I just hope we don't see no Muslims.
It's romance.
You've got shoe polish behind your ear.
And adventure in the Runaway Suspense Hit of the Year. 20th Century Fox presents a Frank Yablans presentation, Silver Streak. Starring Gene Wilder, Jill Clayburgh, Richard Pryor, and Patrick McGowan as Devereaux.
Where are we going so fast?
You've got a dead engineer in a runaway train that's going to hit Chicago in 15 minutes.
By plane, by train, by the edge of your seat. It's the most hilarious suspense ride of your life. Nothing can stop Silver Streak.
So I saved, in my opinion, the best for last. And that's my all-time favorite railroad-themed movie, the 1976 classic Silver Streak, starring Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, Jill Clayburgh, and Patrick McGowan. The movie takes place aboard a cross-country train from Los Angeles to Chicago, and Gene Wilder plays the part of a publisher who meets a woman on the train played by Jill Clayburgh, stumbles upon the murder of her boss, and in the process of getting on and off the train, meets up with Richard Pryor, and they discover that the person responsible for the murder is a man named Devereaux, who's played by Patrick McGowan. The movie was really popular. Two things that the movie is famous for was one, this was Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor's very first movie together. I think there was four movies that they starred in together. So this is the first one of the two of those that they starred in. The movie was also well known for its spectacular ending, which is coming up here behind me. The movie I thought was really well done. They used a Canadian Pacific CP Rail passenger train, using the Canadians' extra equipment that they had on hand for that. As I said before, Amtrak didn't want anything to do with this movie because of this big crash ending at the end of the movie, which was kind of surprising because of what was portrayed in Disaster on the Coastliner. Amtrak took part in that, but yet they didn't want to take part in Silver Streak, which could have been, really positive, portrayal of Amtrak, and could have gotten Amtrak really good publicity, at the time when they were trying to, build themselves up, from the mess created by the merging of all the passenger fleets and everything that, of all the railroads that went into Amtrak. The movie, in my opinion, is pretty realistically portrayed, pretty realistically portrays rail travel. It they used an actual train, of course. The insides of the train were done on sets, which were basically mirror images, I guess you could say, of the real Bud passenger equipment that was used on the Canadian. Of course, since it wasn't Amtrak, they had to make it Americanized, so they called it Amroad instead of Amtrak. The scenes, there's some beautiful scenes of the train passing through the countryside. There's some pretty spectacular stunt work too done, which we'll see here in a moment, both on and off the train. And anyways, I remember when I was a kid seeing this on CBS originally. Then later on, it was aired on late night movies. But it's always been one of my favorites, and with the depiction of the train, of course, and the acting I thought was good. There's some, it's comedy drama. There's funny stuff in it, and then there's the serious side with the art conspiracy, and then the and also the the runaway scene at the end with the shootout between the police and everything. The runaway part, I thought, was really well done. Basically, the three bad guys in the movie, or three remaining bad guys in the movie towards the end, they commandeer the locomotive. Well, the one guy, played by Patrick McGowan, he gets in the cab. He shoots the one engineer, forces the other one to start the train up, and then at which point they, the train starts up, and he knocks one of his cohorts, I guess you could say, off because he was shot and injured. The other guy gets shot by Gene Wilder's character. Excuse me. And then when the engineer keeps, trying to shut down the locomotive by taking his foot off the deadman's pedal, the engineer gets shot, and then a toolbox gets put onto the deadman's pedal to keep the locomotive running, which unfortunately, that was one of the drawbacks with the deadman's pedal on the locomotives years ago. That was, from what I've heard, railroad employees would, or the engineers would get, tired of having to hold their foot down constantly on this pedal to keep the train moving, so they would use a wrench or like in this case, a toolbox or something to hold the pedal down, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the deadman's pedal. The ending, though, was amazingly well done. You gotta remember, this is back when they made movies. They didn't draw them on a computer or anything like that. It wasn't done with miniatures either. Basically, the scenes of the train rushing into the station itself was filmed up in Toronto at the Toronto Union Station, which is a run-through station. It's not a dead end as portrayed in this movie. And the train point of view shots, those were filmed on a high rail truck, basically running into rushing through the yards and into an actual station in Chicago. I think it was like Chicago Northwestern's station or something like that, I think. Then for the actual train, coming off the end of the track and crashing through the station, they used it was a full-size mock-up of the locomotive, and then they built a full-size, replica of the interior of the Toronto Union Station. And then they took this mock-up of the locomotive, put it on a flatbed trailer of a truck, and they basically backed the whole thing through the mock-up of the station. So, it's basically one of those one-take moments where they only had one shot at getting the whole scene right, and I think it turned out spectacularly. Granted, the locomotive probably would have had a little bit more front-end damage than what was portrayed in the movie, but still, it was a spectacular ending. And as you can see here, so this is the high rail shot there, and there's the train crashing through the truck back in the mock-up through the station. And this is amazing, the chaos that's causing, or how they got that all in just one shot. And what was spectacular here, from what I've heard online, there's in this scene, the stunt lady in blue, she was not where she was supposed to be standing when the train came through the wall like that. So when you see the security guard grabbing her and reaching around and grabbing her, that was actually the other stunt person pulling her out of the way into safety, because apparently she was not where she was supposed to be. But just one of the most spectacular movie endings, in my opinion. And in my opinion, probably the best, best portrayed train crash scenes in a movie, even though it wasn't a real train that crashed. So, but anyways, Silver Streak, it's a nearly 2-hour movie. Definitely one to watch. It's a classic. Well, that's a look at my favorite railroad movies. Silver Streak obviously is my favorite. The others are not in any particular order, but these are movies that I love them. Obviously, movies don't 100% portray railroads accurately. There are some liberties that they take. I'm not sure if it's intentional or accidental or what, but trains for years, ever since the motion picture industry started, they've always been a popular subject for movies. So, and obviously for a rail fan like me, it's fun to watch them and see how they're portrayed on the big screen and on TV. So, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please rate, comment, subscribe. Let me know what some of your favorite railroad-themed movies are. Feel free to leave comments too about favorite scenes involving trains that you like, and we'll be sure to discuss those as well. So, anyways, thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay well. I'll catch you in my next video.